Weather portion of AgWeek. This week we're moving on into May, and finally we're starting to see a big surge of warm weather up into the Great Plains states, even into the northern plains. How long will it last? We'll talk about that. The warm surge will likely set off a few spring thunderstorms. The stuff that's been in Texas and Oklahoma will finally come into the northern plains for a bit. We'll talk about how widespread that will or will not be. And obviously from the conclusion that I'm getting to here, it's not going to be all that widespread. We're starting to get to the point now where even though the soils are still fairly wet, we may start looking at some soils being too dry across the Corn Belt and the upper Midwest if we get into hot weather, which we're not really seeing much of yet. Jet stream right now still doing its meandering west to east flow, but a ridge of high pressure building up into the northern plains this week will allow a surge of warm temperatures north, and by warm this time we're talking 70s, some spots near 80s. Not a lot of widespread 80s here, but there will be some temperatures into the 80s. This type of a pattern usually brings some stormy conditions on the western side, especially when the jet crashes a bit, so we'll check out that. There will be pockets of hot weather. By that now, we're into May now, so by hot weather, we really are talking weather that is consistently around 90 or so or above, and that's mostly going to be in the usually hot places of the country. This warm air, though, moving east, and as the ridge shifts into the eastern United States, the eastern seaboard, the eastern Corn Belt will be in line for some very warm conditions, over the next, especially the second part of this period. So it's going to be fairly warm in the Midwest and into the eastern Corn Belt. We're also going to see, interestingly enough, we're also going to see some stormy weather setting up in spots across the northern sections of the Corn Belt, becoming a little more showery down into the south. And as this ridge builds northward into the northern plains, there will likely be one round of pretty heavy thunderstorms into some parts of North Dakota, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. It's not going to be widespread, though. This dome may shift a little bit northwest, southeast, depending on where the front sets up, but it's not likely to be huge. There will likely be some snow, a late May snow, parts of Montana up into southern Canada sometime late this week. Now, the second week of this period, we're starting to see still some showers and stray storms, but not a lot of widespread moisture into the northern plains. So even though now it's only May, the warm temperatures we're showing are not going to be excessively hot, and the grounds are generally fairly wet because of winter snow that's melted and a fairly wet pattern that we had earlier in the spring. If we continue to be fairly dry like this, as warm weather arrives this summer, there will be the concern some spots are just a little too dry.